And with us now, Janine Hendry. She is a community independent candidate for Prahran in the upcoming Victorian state by-election. Really nice to have you here.
Thanks, Leo.
So you using that community independent label, a lot of people are going to make one association or another. How do you, I guess, define it? Why are you using that label? What actually makes you a community independent?
Firstly, because I was elected by the voices of Prahran to represent them. And as you know, this election has had a really short timeline from the resignation of the previous incumbent, Sam Hibbins, to announcing the date of the election. So the community has had to move very, very quickly to find someone that would represent their interest. And the overwhelming thought within my community is they're really tired of the closed political system that we have, and they're excited about the idea of having a community candidate. And when I was asked, I stepped up. Didn't think I would ever go into politics, but I see the same things happening in our community repeatedly. And I think if we're going to get real change, then we need to be on the inside to create that change.
Just on that, because I mean, some people are going to see it and they'll be like, how can an independent be essentially pre-selected by a group? What do you say to that? Because I mean, it's not like we haven't seen this model before. The broad teal label, we've seen that. I live in Kooyong, so I'm well versed in it. But just I guess, what do you say to those who might say, well, how can you be independent if a group's chosen you as their nominated candidate?
Sure, I wasn't actually pre-selected. My only condition in doing this was that there was an opportunity to put out for other community candidates to apply. I believe that was open for 10 days, which we advertised was advertised on the Voices of Prahran and through social media. So there was an open and I guess an open and fair election. I can't say I was pre-selected, although I was asked. The only condition I would do it is if it was actually a fair competition, if you like.
Gotcha. Now, some people who are watching this are going to be familiar with your work with the March for Justice back in 2021, which was obviously huge for anyone who remembers. We were covering it at the same time, right? And your work organising that. The issues that were discussed during that march still prevalent, obviously, in Australia, as has been well documented. What are you going to be able to do about that as a state MP if elected?
Mm-hmm. The great thing about being a state MP rather than federal is that state has a number of levers at their control, and the two biggest ones of those being health and education. And I know very well that when we're particularly talking about violence against women, education is one of the biggest levers that we have to pull. And certainly there needs to be a lot of work around health, mental health and welfare, which are, as you know, all state issues. Federal government can look at broader policy initiatives, but there's certainly a lot that we can do at state level.
Gotcha. And in terms of a more broad platform, are there any other issues that you're specifically targeting? Hyperlocal issues. It is geographically, I mean, it's a decent population, but it's a pretty small, concentrated electorate, Prahran.
It's one of the highest density electorates in Prahran, and it's probably one of the most diverse electorates ever. So talking to my community, and bear in mind, I've lived in this area for 35 years. The issues that really are coming up time and time again is that there are certainly issues around development. Prahran's got a lot of history, like Kuyong, heritage overlays and history. There's been a lot of development and huge increases in population over the last 3 to 4 years. And there's huge concern in the community about that development and about the amenity to how people move around the community. And one of the things that people probably know less about me is that I actually studied architecture, heritage and conservation at the University of Sydney. So I've got a really great background in understanding how people use their built environment. So that's certainly a big issue. We've also got, in terms of, we talked about diversity in the population. There's huge income diversity in Prahran. So there are a lot of people doing it tough. And I know that. I see it in my community. I work on the lines as a crisis support worker at Lifeline, so I hear it when people call. I know how tough people are doing it. So I think there's a lot more we can do at local levels. I mean, there's 7 food banks in the electorate of Prahran. That tells you a lot about the needs around working with people. So for me, the really big issues, Leo, are certainly equality, because equality absolutely must sit. It sits at the base of gendered violence, and it is what drives violence against women. But when we look at other issues like climate change, like cost of living, like how people are living and engaging in their community, equality sits at the base of all of those issues as well. So my focus is equality, but it's also understanding what people's needs are and recognising that we can do a lot. And there's going to be much more pressure on our built environment with the state government's housing policy. There's going to be more pressure to build more towers, housing towers to house people. That is a great thing. But it needs to be done to ensure that everyone is able to have a good standard of living.
Now, this is obviously a Greens held seat. They've held it for about a decade at this point.
Yep.
What would you be able to do that they haven't been able to do? Because the one similarity that you would definitely have is you'd both be on the crossbench, and
Yep.
you'd be on a crossbench when the government has a majority. So they don't technically need your vote to get anything through.
And that's actually a really, really good question. I think what I offer is that I'm actually free to fight for my community. I'm free to vote on things that are important to my community, to put forth legislation and changes that are important to the people of Prahran. I'm not in any way obliged to vote with the party. And I think that that's a really important difference. And I also think beyond this by-election and going into the next state election, which is due in 2 years, it's going to be increasingly important to have independent candidates sitting on the crossbench to facilitate changes that are really important to communities. So, yeah, I think the biggest difference is I'm really here to break that nexus of a closed political system, which is really serving us less well as the years go by, and as things become more complex, both at a local level, a state level, and then globally. It's really tough out there, and people are really feeling like their voices aren't being heard. And that's what I did with the March for Justice. All I did is I advocated for people who were unable to advocate, and that's what I will do for the people of Prahran.
Can I ask you just quickly about a flagship Greens policy this election, which is those 50-cent public transport fares? They've been pushing that a lot. I think a lot of Melburnians probably agree that public transport is way too expensive at this point. Do you back that policy, or just in general, do you have anything on public transport in your platform?
I must say it's not a policy that I am going forward with, but as a policy, I think the more we can get people onto public transport and off our roads and onto public transport and bikes and within their communities has got to be something that actually everyone benefits from. But again, it's an issue of equality. If you're living in the outer suburbs of Melbourne, for example, you often don't even have any access to public transport, let alone being able to take advantage of a 50-cent fare. So and I think it's fine in an inner city like Prahran or in Keong, where there's plenty of trams and trains and buses, but if you're living in the outer suburbs of Melbourne, for example, there's not a lot of choice. And so, yep, great to see people getting onto public transport, but I think there's also some bigger issues around equality, and that's making sure that actually everyone does have access to take advantage of that. No point putting a policy up if it's only for those of us who are advantaged by living in the inner city.
I just finally, this is a by-election being held in early February. Turnout obviously can be a bit of a concern. You don't have Labor running, obviously. Some might see that as an advantage, but also some of their voters just might not turn out there. And of course, right
Correct.
now, when we're speaking, plenty of people just are not engaged in news, in politics. How are you going to be able to reach them, not just with your own platform, but just with the general message that there is a by-election on?
You are right. I mean, I've been knocking on people's doors and they have no clue that there is a by-election on at all. People are away, they're on holidays. For me, it's just a matter of doing what I can. Postering shops, letterbox dropping, talking to people, etc. But it's really tough, and I'm sure everyone else is finding it exactly the same. It's a hot day, people want to go to the beach, and when you're dealing with a lot of people in our population are just not engaged politically. They're just not engaged, and I know you and I kind of find that probably difficult to understand, because I always think it's a real, if you don't care about politics, then you have to be in a pretty privileged position. But we can only do what we can only do, and I think we're really blessed in this country that we have the AAC and the VAC who ensure that everyone is treated impartially. So
yeah, and I know the VSC will be doing their work to make sure people know there is a by-election on, but we will cover this campaign very closely. Best of luck to you. Really appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Leo. Have a great day.